Okay, because of time, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. Welcome to our canvassing training, everyone. Yeah, I think maybe we'll just introduce ourselves as the speakers. My name is Celine. I work at the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, and I go by she, her pronouns, based in California, and I'll pass it to Leah to introduce herself and get us started.
Hey everyone, my name is Leah. I use she, her pronouns. I'm based in DC and I help support organizers with the US Campaign for Palestinian Rights. Excited for this topic. I think I can help us dive right in if you don't mind going to the goals slide. So, we're really glad to have you all with us today. By being here, you're making a choice to be part of tactics that build movements for the long haul. So, whether you've never run a canvas before or you're a skilled canvasser looking to uh, increase those skills, this is for you. And we want to let you know that we're really going to be using the example of our city council divestment focus for tax day. We'll be sharing a lot more about this, but I'm just going to drop the interest form in the chat. And these lessons can be applied to any campaign, any social justice work, but we'll continuously refer to that example of our tax day for local divestment. The next slide. How we'll learn that today in the next 55 minutes, we'll go through understanding the phases of a campaign, how canvassing can be useful in every phase. We'll talk about locations and we'll do a little brainstorm with you in the chat. We will also learn tactics for canvassing. We'll learn how to plan for onboarding canvassers because this is really about bringing in people to volunteer and canvass and build your group as much as it is around reaching new people who you meet while canvassing. And lastly, we will tell you all about how to apply these lessons to a tax day local divestment action, and we'll show you how to plug in. I'm going to put in the chat our full list of resources. We'll refer to this. Oh, thank you for letting me know about my quiet audio. I can fix that right now. And please do keep. All right, is that better? I apologize for being quiet. Better? All right. Thank you all so much. Wonderful. So yeah, so I put the resources in the chat. We'll be continuously referring to these and the slides will walk you through everything. If you have to step off, please find the recording at this link. Oh, apologies. So you can find all the resources at the link that I'm about to share in the chat. Even if you have to step off early, the recording will immediately upload to that link. Next slide. Okay, and again, we really want you to plug in today. We have so many ways for people who are brand new to justice work or people who've done this for decades. Everyone is welcome as we share in the outrage at the continued assault on Gaza, the spending of our money on bombs and weapons instead of schools and hospitals. This is our opportunity to call people into that work together. So we hope to have you on board. I'll pass back to Celine.
Thank you, Leah. Yeah, so I'm just going to get into why canvassing is important to help us build winning campaigns. And I just want to start by, talking about like the phases of a campaign. So, every campaign should have different phases, and it can, it doesn't need to look like it doesn't need to be linear. It can be like, every campaign will have its ups and downs, will have its moments of momentum, and will have its moments where, you're going to be thinking more about reflection and assessment and consolidation. So, but, just kind of broadly, like the types of phases you might consider are a first phase, which is going to be more about starting to build out your base. And this should not stop at the first phase, it should be ongoing. But, starting to build up popularization and awareness of your campaign, its goals, its target, and to give you some time to like recruit volunteers and build out coalitions in the initial stages. So like tactics you might use in the first phase of a campaign could be teach-ins, writing op-eds, hosting community or volunteer meetings, phone banks, and canvassing. And we're going to talk about why canvassing can be applied to each of these phases. The second phase could be where you enter more of the mobilizations and publicly making demands of your target. So here you can think about delivering petitions and beginning direct pressure on your target through different avenues to achieve intermediate and short-term wins. You can also think more about like media campaigns, getting endorsements from different organizations, and being more targeted in your disruptions. And the third phase can be where you kind of like think more about increasing pressure on your target or escalation to sustain your campaign's momentum. Again, you can do this through multiple avenues. You can think about media, you can think about protests, you can think about like, if you're doing city council, like you're mobilizing for public comment and things like that. But in each of these phases, you can use canvassing in a different way. In the first phase, you can use canvassing to really raise awareness about your target and about your strategy and bring people who are interested into your campaign. So here you can think about, like, for example, canvassing to just like alert, just be like, hey, we have this campaign, just to kind of talk to people about like where their tax money is going, or, depending on what kind of campaign you have, this can be the period where you kind of build awareness and it'll help you recruit volunteers. And those can be your objectives, for example, in the first phase. Maybe in the second phase, you want to bring them into like a really concrete action and you can canvass around that. So for example, you can canvas to plug new supporters into concrete demands, including like using an action tool or signing a petition, or joining you on April 15th for like a tax day mobilization at your city hall or your city council meeting to make public comment. And in the escalation phase, you can also canvas to invite supporters into actions, into rallies, into your mobilizations, and you can in that way get a pulse on how your mobilizations are being perceived by your base. So this is just like some ways to think about like how we can use canvassing. I think it's always a good tactic to use to engage people on whatever you're doing at any stage. And of course, before you do go out and canvass, you want to think about like what are your objectives right now for canvassing? What are your goals? And organize your canvas along those goals that you kind of create for yourself. And again, the kind of what canvassing is doing is really starting a conversation that's kind of part of the goal and shifting from education to activation. And again, you can integrate it into any part of your campaign as long as you're clear on what your goals are. So if you want to canvass to recruit for an action, then you just got to be clear on that. If you want to canvass to raise awareness, that can also be an objective. If you want to canvass to recruit volunteers, that can be an objective as well. So just to kind of talk a little bit before I pass it back to Leah about where to canvass. Again, think about your goals. You don't have to have a list of places that you can go door knocking necessarily, or homes. You can even think about, like, depending on where your base is, or where your community is, like, where are the people that you want to build with? Where do they go? Are there certain events that they go to that you might want to have a table at? Or is there like a shopping center that you feel like you can have a table at outside that can get pretty busy, that you can, talk to people passing by and get them to stop and talk to you for a minute? Think about like public places, and again, think about like where your base goes and that's where you basically want to be. Is it a mosque where you want to build with the Muslim community and you know that the mosque has an event on a certain night? Maybe you have a table there and you can have your flyers and your pitch ready. But in general, depending on where you choose to canvas, also think about your positionality, right? And your relationship to the community, or your relationship to the neighborhood that you're canvassing in. So for example, if I know that I want to get the Muslim community out to an event and I want to go canvas at a mosque, I'm going to be really aware of how I'm going to, present myself, and also like just, having the cultural competency necessary to be able to relate to and engage people. And you could think about that similar to any community that you're engaging with. So just keeping in mind cultural competency and being respectful of the spaces that you're going to be canvassing in, depending on where they are. And yeah, think about, definitely you want to relate to people. You want to go and connect with people and try to bring them into your campaign work. So just trying to be aware of that, I think, is important. So I'm gonna pass it back to Leah to like brainstorm with us examples of places where we could potentially do some good canvassing, and maybe we can have a bit of a conversation about it too.
Great.
Oh, you're a bit choppy, Leah.
Oh, yeah. All right. How is my audio now?
Much better, much better.
Okay, thank you. So yes, we really recommend starting with public areas where you will meet the people who you think will support your campaign. And so what I want us to do when we think locations is work backwards from your audience. If I'm trying to get people to my local city council meeting, I want residents, right? Where do those residents tend to transit in the morning before work or after work? Where do residents gather when they have time, right? And so if you go to the next slide, Celine, and then if you could X out of presenter mode so we can see live edits, I'll be adding things as you go. Where are you all thinking about canvassing? Is the question we wanted to ask you. I'm going to put these options that we've already thought of in the chat, but would love to hear a couple examples, and we can put them in the slides for future reference. Where are you thinking about canvassing? Let us know in the chat. And while folks do that, I'll just share a couple more examples from my experience. So one of my most, I think, powerful transformative experiences with canvassing was in the context of the decriminalization of sex work campaign in DC, which is really at the intersection of thinking about the criminalization of Black people, of trans people, of Black trans women. And that campaign, we found we really needed to reach people who were part of nightlife and like were familiar with the sex work scene. And one way that we reached those people, the most useful example was when there was a giant music festival, free outdoor, in the location of a key neighborhood. People were just standing there listening to music. It was a very easy time to find them. And I'm seeing examples here that are kind of in a similar vein of like, where are people waiting around? I love that example of the laundromat. I've seen people do know your rights canvassing at laundromats. I love the idea of bus stops. People already have to wait for the bus. So these are really fantastic examples. Wow, we have so many coming in. We already filled out our slides, but I just want to note that there's even more examples. And a couple other ideas I want to put out there is combining canvassing with mutual aid or community outreach events. If you're already setting up to do Know Your Rights in your community, or you're already distributing food on Saturdays, we can really be in the lineage of probably the most famous group that did this is the Black Panthers, where there's a giving to community and then a receiving back of learning about where the community is at on your issues. And it's really an exchange, right, is what is the key way to think about this. So if you can go to the next slide. Thank you so much, Celine, for filling that in. That was a huge number of examples so quickly. And again, I want to note that we didn't even get to add everything. So I love this. So this is what I want to let you all know about a guide. There's a lot being shared in this training. You can download almost all the key pieces in this short 2-page guide. You may have some trouble clicking that link. Let me fix it. So in this guide, the very first page, you'll see a section about location selection that has some of these ideas. So as you get started, you can check your way through these lessons, and we've really assembled everything to make it easy. No need to be intimidated if you've never done this before. It really is a step-by-step process that allows anyone to build community power. All right, next slide. All right, so now that we understand why canvassing is so critical to every phase of your campaign, we want to dive into how canvassing actually happens on the ground. Oh, and sorry, one more reminder that we are really hoping to gather your interest and support you on your next steps. So as part of that, we have a form that you can fill out, and we'll follow up with you by text about your next steps. So if you're excited about this so far but need support, please do fill this out. Great. All right, next slide. So now we're going to dive into what the canvas looks like, and then we'll step back to how do we get volunteers to the canvas. That's our kind of roadmap. So the canvassing conversation. First, we want to share how to open the conversation. So it's so automatic to say, do you have a minute to sign our petition? And that's what I used to do. But then I learned that that is not the best way to canvass, because too many people will say no. People need to hear a little bit about what you have to say to get interested. And this is an active act of outreach. We're reaching out to community that may not understand that our material desires to end capitalism and imperialism and have a world with healthcare and food and schools for everyone. That vision is probably shared by that person you're talking to, but they might not know yet. So we got to start with something a little bit more compelling. So if we're trying to start somewhere compelling, a great example would be, let's say your county, you learn, has $15 million of tax dollars invested in Chevron, which is a genocide profiteer and a profiteer of fossil fuels and planet destruction. People have heard of Chevron, but they probably haven't heard that your county's invested in it. So a much better opening line would be, did you know that our county's invested $15 million of our tax dollars in Chevron, right? And we think this is a good time to ask because we're all paying our taxes. We're having more trouble than ever affording the cost of living. And we know that our taxes are going to rise under the current government and their kind of policies that are opposed to this invest divest vision we have. So we leave with something that actually hooks people in, and then we start the conversation. Don't say, do you have a minute to sign? Don't make a yes, no out. That's my biggest advice to you. The other thing to do is to make it really personal. So if you live in the nearby neighborhood, or you got into this issue because you were upset about the bombing of hospitals and the underfunding of hospitals here, bring that in ASAP. You're trying to have a real human connection. So before you canvas, it's really critical to think about what is your role and your stake in this issue, and then you can share that with people. So that's how I would recommend starting. Next slide. So next, focus on material needs is our next key tip to continue the combo. We want to offer some advice from really the best of the best when it comes to the history of U.S. mass movement building. Was Ella Baker. She was a leader in the NAACP, in SNCC. She helped birth the Black Power movement. She led Black cooperative movements. Can't recommend reading about her enough if you've never heard about Ella Baker. She has this great quote. So she's saying, how did she canvass when she was working with the NAACP? She said, maybe you would start with a simple thing, like the fact that they had no streetlights, or the fact that in the given area, somebody had been arrested or had been jailed in a manner that was considered illegal and unfair, and the like. You would deal with whatever the local problem was on the basis of the needs of the people. You would try, and on the basis of the needs of the people, you would try to organize them into the NAACP, right? So I really want to emphasize this. We're not trying to force people to share our top concerns. We're trying to show people how their top concerns are related to our top concerns and how by joining us, we can do something about it. Next slide. So continuing the convo, I want to talk about two examples of common questions and challenges that we hear. So one is the unfamiliar audience. So when you use the word divestment, in spite of years now of powerful divestment campaigns and the lineage from the South African anti-apartheid and divestment movement, a lot of people aren't going to know what you're talking about. It's a lot of syllables, it's a complex idea. So if somebody was like, what do you mean by divestment? I thought money to Israel was something the federal government does. This is a very common perception that the only way that our tax dollars go to Israel is through, our taxpayer dollars. So with that in mind, this is where you meet people where they're at. I love what Sam's saying in the chat about using more one-syllable words. The guidance I've always had is to try to write at a 5th grade reading level, right? Because we're not here to prove we're better than other people. The opposite. We want to reach people where they're at. So this is where you might take the time to explain what divestment is in your own words, right? And this is where you can explain strategy at the same time as you explain your issue. So what I mean by that is when you explain what divestment is, you can talk about it as an opportunity. Like, did you know that actually our taxpayer dollars millions of them go to corporations as part of our city's long-term places it puts its money to continue to sustain the city's treasury. And so as part of those investments, we actually have the power right here, even if the federal government isn't listening to what we have to say, we have the power to move money away from genocide and apartheid and bombs and weapons and hospital assaults, right? Like, there's a way that you can explain what you mean that also calls people into the strategy, right? And that's really, really critical. Another audience I want to talk about is this idea of it being this being a local issue. So this is often the pushback we get, especially at the city council level. This city isn't concerned with international relations. We've heard this at the county level. You might hear it from a person. They might be like, the price of eggs is $12. the government's going wild. Why would I put time and money into what's happening over there in Palestine? There's this separation of our futures, even though we know how intertwined our well-being is and how the policies and the opposition and the enemies of the people are the same. People we're talking to don't know that. So your goal in a conversation where someone doesn't think it's a local issue is not to berate or put someone down. Your goal is to hear what they're saying and connect it to what you're saying. So let's say that they're concerned about the price of eggs, right? That's a striking example of how deeply our government has failed to make food affordable, to respond to the needs of everyday people. And it's a problem that the $18 billion that the US sent to Israel last year could easily solve. And this is where a place that you might help to start would be our Not My Tax Dollars map to familiarize yourself. You can actually look up your city and see how many teachers could we have? How many households with solar panels could we have? How many free groceries per month could we have if we would just stop sending that money to Israel? And this, of course, is a wider entry point, right? Because Palestine is this microcosm of everything that is wrong with the way our society functions and everything that we imagine for our futures, right? So you can talk about Palestine and why the government isn't responding to your inability to buy eggs, but is responding to the Israeli government's request for billions of dollars more weapons. That's how you meet someone where they're at. So it really helps to ask questions. It helps to try to build from their understanding of the issue. Because you'll also be surprised how much people understand. And this is the thing that blows my mind. I bet everyone in this virtual room has talked to someone since October 7th whose mind has changed on Palestine. So this is your chance to find those people. So I just really want to emphasize again with these two key audiences, you will find people who don't know what you're talking about, and you've got to take the time to break it down and explain the strategy. And two, you will find people who might even be a little hostile or just questioning about why he's talking about Palestine when we can't afford rent and eggs. And that is people to meet. So I just really, really want to emphasize this. And this is also where we'll get to this in the next section. This is where practice is key, right? None of us are born experts at persuasion. We practice that together. So even if your first convo with someone who, says something, maybe even a bit unkind or big pushback doesn't go well, that's a learning moment to think for the future. And as we're diving into this, I want to share with you our talking points document. And I just want to shout out Thomas and Rachel in the chat about talking about moving your mom. Canvassing is a good practice for moving our loved ones, and moving our loved ones is a good practice for canvassing. So you can exchange those lessons. So I just wanted to share these talking points. This is part of our City Council Divestment Toolkit. You'll see the link to that at the top of the same talking points document, and I'm also going to drop it for you again. We want to make sure you know that there is so many resources out there if you want to get started with this, and your newness to the issue is not an obstacle. So take time to familiarize yourself with these talking points if you feel totally new. And you'll see that we touch on even more issues than I just discussed. There's so many ways we can bring people in through the legacy of international consciousness at the city level for maybe South Africa or Ukraine. There's so many ways to situate this work as actually part of a really powerful and transformative movement. So check those out and use that as a way to start these conversations that might feel difficult. All right, next slide. So, okay, great. Usually people are pretty friendly, I would say, where I live. And then that's not the case. Someone asked about rural areas. There are parts of this country that have had a more effective, I would call it a brainwashing or a detachment of people from their material needs, right? Because people in rural areas are actually more harmed by the federal government's disinvestment. And yet you have more support for Trump, for MAGA, for imperialism, for Christian Zionism. These are the things that we find a fair amount of support in some rural areas. That's where it's really important that we discern who here is movable and who isn't. And a lot of people really are. I just want to emphasize that. We cannot afford to push people out of these mass coalitions. We need to fight fascism. So don't write your city off. At the same time, a way to be prepared for the fact that some people will be unreachable, because there are a lot of people in this country who have attached themselves to patriarchy and whiteness and capitalism. So there's a lot of people out there who are really stuck in their ways and thinking that they should support Israel even though it doesn't benefit them. If people are deep and far gone, you don't actually want to waste your time, because it's not just the time, spending 10 minutes in a circular conversation. It's the emotional impact on you as a canvasser that you just spent 10 minutes dealing with someone who maybe is just deeply racist, right? Don't spend your time on those people. You need to save your energy for people who seem movable. So 3 example lines that I use all the time. If someone's saying something kind of wild, I'll actually stop disagreeing with them and I'll just say, hey, I hear you. Have a nice day. Or if someone is going on a big rant and it's not getting us anywhere, I might say, thank you for sharing. I'll be leaving now. Or if someone is just not respecting my time, I might actually do a little white lie and say, oh, I actually have an appointment. I have to end my canvassing now. I'll end the convo here. So that's 3 lines to have in your back pocket. Can you go to the next slide? So there's also a difference between people who are kind of wasting your time or being like not self-aware, not kind, and people who are actually really escalatory and possibly even dangerous. And this is where I want to share our de-escalation guide with you. This is a great resource from a local organizer who I know, who really kindly shared this in some work we did last year to prepare people to support encampments. These skills are so useful. We need them now more than ever. This is also something you don't get good at immediately. You have to practice. But I do want to make sure that you all can see this de-escalation guide. If you're concerned about escalated or dangerous people when you're canvassing, I can't recommend enough to read this whole guide before you get started. I want to go through 3 examples. So one example is being direct. And there's actually, I think, 6 strategies in this document, but let's go through 3 that I thought were the most relevant. So, all right, someone is getting too close to you, or someone is yelling in your face. The first thing to do is just say, sir, please stop yelling in my face. I'm going to step back now. Or ma'am, I didn't come here to have an argument. Please, let's just step away and end this now, right? This is directness. Directness is key. Sometimes we get afraid when folks are aggressive with us and actually forget to even ask someone to stop doing it. That's also critical so that people around you can be called in. And that's where we get to, I'm going to jump down to number 3, delegate. So delegation is also key. And this is where we always suggest canvassing with a buddy, because your buddy can help and people who are passing by can help too. So great examples of delegation strategy could be, and these are all in the guide. Let's say that the person who's yelling at you is actually, honestly, you see this a lot. You'll see men who are walking with a woman and the man gets more aggressive. This is not something that is always how it plays out, but just to say this example of how patriarchy might show up in your canvas. It could be helpful to turn to this woman who is this person's companion and say, hey, your buddy seems pretty upset right now. Do you think you might want to help him relax so that this doesn't become a problem for all of us, right? You can actually call in their people to help. Because oftentimes people someone is with are actually quite embarrassed by the escalation that they're doing. Another thing that you can do is use other delegation skills. So if you have 2 canvassing buddies on the other side, you can be like, hey, y'all, I actually need help over here, right? Don't forget to ask for help. And lastly, you can think about how delegation can help with physical space, right? So you might say hey, everyone, let's all walk away and go back to the metro station where it's, where we feel safer, right? So that's some examples of delegation. Lastly, I want to share about distraction. So distraction can be surprisingly effective, right? Let's say that your buddy is getting harassed. Your canvassing buddy is 10 feet away from you and they're actually getting harassed by someone they were trying to canvass. That's a great moment to walk over and say, hey, buddy, we're actually needed at XYZ thing. Or, oh, did you see that there's actually a parade passing by? Or did you see that, the XYZ, I just saw that the farmer's market is closing up, whatever. This is where your acting skills can help, but it's really important to use distraction, whether to kind of break the conversation and get your buddy away to safety, or using distraction to just straight up de-escalate directly with the aggressor, right? Because breaking the chain, they're often trying to get you riled up. And if you actually just go a totally different direction, it can be surprisingly effective. And I'm saying this as someone who has de-escalated people who are showing up at a protest with some pretty potentially scary intentions. I have been shocked by how well it works to walk and talk with the person about something completely irrelevant. So these are tools you have in your toolbox. And I think that these tools are really, really critical for us to have available and to feel like you can call upon, right? And this is also where debrief is important too, because if you actually realize, we went canvassing at this event and we learned that the people there were pretty aggressive, you also don't need to come back, right? So this is all a call you can make with your group. Again, I do a lot of canvassing and actually the vast majority of my conversations are very friendly. but I keep this in my back pocket for maybe the one time every few times that something happens. All right, next slide. Okay, so I'm going to pass back to Celine. So we just learned where canvassing fits, why we do it, where we do it, how to actually do the canvas effectively. And now we're going to dive into how to actually build a volunteer group that can build long-term power, because you can't be the only one canvassing. You need a group. So I'll pass to Celine.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Leah. So this portion is about, again, recruiting and onboarding people so that you don't have to canvas alone, and so that even if you start out with a small team, you can figure out like how you can build it throughout the canvassing process. Again, just want to plug again, we have this in the part 2 and part 3 of the Canvassing 101 guide. We have some material and information on how you can engage and train people up to Canvas and also follow up with people who took action. So the questions you want to ask yourselves are, how many canvassers do I need to recruit and how can I keep them involved? We would recommend you think about like breaking up different roles and assigning different people to them. You can canvas, you can go out and canvas with like your coalition, you can go out and canvas with your organization. It can just be a group of your friends, who want to go out and canvas. But we recommend like about 3 to 4 people minimum to fill each of these roles. So you definitely want to have a canvas lead or co-leads. And this person needs to be able to keep track of a list and be really enthusiastic about the task at hand. Their responsibilities really would be, printing out the materials, the canvassing sheets, handouts, sheets for volunteers that you'll use to train them on the spot, and also material for people that you're canvassing. So like flyers about your campaign or whatever it is, whatever literature you want to pass out to people when you're canvassing. And you want to have this lead really work through the steps in the guide that we have to be able to train and recruit other canvassers. You also want to have like people who are recruiting people who can come out and help canvas. You can just spend 2 hours, about 2 hours, just messaging, calling people, texting them, and inviting them to canvas with you, especially if you want to add more people to your team. These people, you can task people with bottom lining recruitment. So that can look like sharing your canvassing, date and time and information to group chats. You can text and call people one-on-one and invite them to join personally. You can then put people who agree to canvas in a chat and send them a reminder. You can add, and then you can also add if you basically secure and you have a canvas planned, you can add that to the USCPR action tax day map so that we as USCPR can actually help boost outreach and boost your canvas action. You can also either have the lead do this or have someone else do this that's supporting your lead, a check-in and a checkout person. So this person needs to be on time and stay the entire time. And their responsibility really is to greet people and make sure they all have the materials that they need. It's good to, again, train people on the spot, just take like, 15, 20 minutes to just have people go through the talking points, role play a little bit, do a mini training, again, that we have described in our guide. And after the canvas is done, reconvene everyone who canvassed and have on the spot follow-up conversations and a debrief together. So again, this person can either be your lead or it can be a separate person that can support your lead in checking in and checking out. And then also the last thing you might want to have, especially if you're going to be doing this at like a public event or you have a table, you want to have your materials ready. So, you need like some kind of vehicle to transport your materials. You can have a table, you can have literature and materials that you want to give out, different supplies. You can have food or coffee or snacks. And you can just set up your table and just make sure you have like the materials that you need for your canvas, right? And then you also want to set a goal number of additional volunteers to recruit. So rather than setting like random numbers, you want to set a goal for recruitment connected to your both your goals of growing your, your organization or your group and your political goals. So for example, you can think about how many people currently support your campaign, or how many people came to your last event, and can you get half that many people to join you in canvassing? Or can you get a certain number from those people who've been coming to your events to actually join you in canvassing, which is having them step up from like attending an event to actually participating and work for this campaign. And let's say you're doing like a referendum and you need like 2,000 signatures from people in your city. Maybe you have a divestment referendum and you want to get it on your town's ballot. You might want to set this out. Like, we want to plan 10 canvases at different places, and you want to get 200 signatures per canvas. So how many people are you going to need to be able to do that, if you want to split it up in that way? So it's important to like really think, and really actually try to plan out the numbers so that you have concrete goals, so that you can see if you've met them, if you haven't met them, why or why not, and make an assessment of what you need to change or do differently to be able to achieve your goals. So again, it's really helpful in anything that we do when we organize to be as concrete as we can so that we can measure whether we're reaching our goals or not, and give us a more concrete assessment as to why that is or isn't. So again, before you canvass, or like when this is like, you can do this on site. You want to, again, lead, if you're leading your canvas, lead with enthusiasm. So it's important when when you have your people ready and prepared and convened, that you open up with talking about why this campaign is important, why you care about it personally, and why canvassing is important. It's important to kind of offer a grounding to get people feeling energized and excited and feel more related and connected, and understand that, this might seem like, some people might feel nervous about it, or, this is one aspect of a broader campaign, but why is this task actually really important in the broader picture? So it's important to open up with some kind of grounding about, and framing about the campaign, why we're doing this, how canvassing is important to it. You also want to make sure people introduce themselves, and, depending on how you're canvassing, you can canvass in groups or in buddies and pairs. So have them share names, their pronouns, like have them answer the question of, what's making you excited about canvassing, what's making you anxious. It's totally fine and healthy to acknowledge the anxieties about canvassing and actually have people practice. So let people do a little bit of role play, let people practice it a little bit before they start, get familiar with the talking points. You don't need to literally read off a script when you talk to people. So it's helpful to just, get familiar with what you want to say, have people practice it out loud, and that hopefully will help get a little bit of the, calm a little bit of the anxieties that people have about canvassing. And even just acknowledging the anxieties, I think also helps a lot when people, especially when it's, no matter how many times you do this, you might feel a little bit anxiety, but it's good to acknowledge it and make sure that maybe you pair new people with people who have more experience, and that way they can learn and feel more comfortable. After the canvas, either on the spot or within 24 hours, there's 3 things that are important to do. Number 1 is debrief. So this is recommended to do just like on the spot. If you've tabled at an event, after, just have people go around and share what went well and what didn't go well, like what really worked when you talk to people, what didn't work, why is that, and what lessons can we apply to future canvassing efforts. So it's important to get the debrief when it's still fresh in people's memory, and to use that debrief to refine your scripts, to refine your messaging, and to even refine where you're canvassing in the future. So let's say you canvassed at an event, but you heard that there's another thing happening that people are interested in going to. You can use the debrief and assessment to figure out what's your next steps and how you can change the material you're working off of. And then also follow up quickly, because people's interest, people's excitement fades fast, and quick follow-up helps you to keep them engaged. And if you don't, if you don't track people or get their contacts, like let's say you're talking to someone and they're very interested it's okay to get you should get their contact actually, or like have them sign up on an email list or give you their contacts, because you want to be able to build with them. So, you know, again, people's excitement fades pretty fast. So you want to follow up within 24 hours and just thank them for, you know, ensure that you have follow-up materials, like an email or a text or an invitation to an event. Send that out to people who expressed interest during their canvassing, during your canvassing. So you can be like, hey, thanks for, thanks for talking. Here's some more materials about what we discussed. If you're interested in coming to an event, here's something we have coming up. We'd love to see you there. And it's also going to be helpful because maybe down the line, you can also ask them to actually become a canvasser, especially if they were very interested. And it's also good to follow up and thank the people who came out and volunteered, and make sure that they're kept in the loop as well. And then within like 1 to 2 weeks after the canvas, it's really important to think about one-on-one conversations. So let's say you're a group of canvassers highlighted, let's say you spent like all day at an event, the community event, and you had like a group of like 7 to 10 people who really expressed, or even like 3 people who really expressed interest in the campaign. Follow up with them and immediately after, and schedule a one-on-one and see if you can actually either get on the phone with them and talk to them one-on-one to kind of learn about them more and understand what their interests are, and bring them into your work, bring them into your campaign. It's really important to do this because people also want to feel, if they're interested, they want to feel like they can plug in and they want a way to plug in. So it's important to follow up with them. And you can also even try to schedule a meeting in person and just get coffee with them and chat to them, and you can, understand their interests and hear from them then. You can also follow up by text or phone is ideal. Emails usually get a low response rate. And then, again, invite them to an event. And make sure to also get back to the people that you that volunteered with you, and also try to put them into like different leadership roles, because you want to build leadership with people. So let's say you attend a canvas for the first time. The next time you ask your volunteer to recruit a friend for the next one. Maybe at the next one, they build more experience. You ask them to actually help you with the check-in or help you with the training. And then maybe at the 4th time, you invite them to join the Canvas leadership team and help you actually plan out the location. So if you have consistent volunteers, make sure you're giving them a little bit more responsibilities in future canvases so that they feel more ownership, and you can also hear from them what they're interested in doing so that they build up their skills and their leadership. And this is like just this apprenticeship model from Mina Arya of Uprooted and Rising. It starts with, you have, like, let's say you pair up someone with experience and someone who's new, and you start with I do, they watch, and then we talk, and then I do, they help, and then you guys talk. Or then you ask the person that you're mentoring to do the action, you help them, then you guys talk, then they do it fully, and you just watch, and then you talk, and then they'll be able to repeat the same cycle to build up more mentorship and more leadership. Before we get into action items and next steps, I just want to see if Leah, you have anything to add there, or if you're good to move.
I would just say that I want to summarize a key takeaway from what Celine just shared, which is that asking people their feedback, their emotional experience, identifying their strengths and weaknesses is much more effective than telling people how the canvas went or the strengths and weaknesses you see, right? So that curiosity about that individual person's experience with like being asked to step up as the canvassing check-in person, that is like what builds the fabric of like a strong organizing community that can do this work. And the way I try to think about it is show, don't tell, when I'm explaining things from my perspective, and like listen, don't tell when I'm trying to follow up with someone about how something went. I think one of the best organizers I've ever met is someone who, like, after any event without fail, he would just give you a call the next day and try to get you on the phone for a few minutes to ask how it was for you. I think that's the common thread throughout all of these leadership development strategies. Thankfully.
Yeah, thanks, Leah. Yeah, one-on-one goes a really long way. One-on-one with the people who express interest, but also your volunteers, also the members of your coalition, of your organization. Check in with them, see what they think went well and what didn't. And also one-on-ones can also encourage people to share more than they might in a group debrief. So it's really helpful to also have that in addition to group check-ins and debriefs. Okay, so just to close out with some action items and next steps, and then maybe in the last like 5 minutes we can take some questions. We want to plug our take action form. This will if you're interested in joining us and taking action on tax day, which is April 15th, this is a really good moment to draw attention to where your tax money is going, to militarism, to war, to this genocide that Israel is committing in Gaza and Palestine more broadly. So, we want to really encourage people to think about ways that they can take action on tax day, whether that's doing, a mobilization or testifying or testimony at, City Hall, or, or even just hosting a canvas or wheat pasting. Any actions that you can do on tax day, it's going to be a really significant moment and a significant day to draw attention to like where our money needs to be going as opposed to where it is currently going. So we encourage you to fill out our interest form. And we also want to encourage you to register your actions. So let's say you organize a canvas or a wheat paste or a mobilization. You can post it on our registration page so that we as USCPR can actually drive people to join your action. So we're building out like a mapping of like where different groups are taking up action on tax day. So you can fill that out there. And we also have additional resources. You can check out uscpr.org/BDS, where we have like additional BDS materials. We also have our City Council Divestment Toolkit. This is a toolkit that includes, different case studies and learned lessons from different divestment or City Council municipal campaign examples. We have materials in there like language for template resolutions. We have links to materials from the American Friends Service Committee, which have a lot of great information and ways to think figure out like how to build your own divestment campaign. We have like talking points for when you are organizing at your city level, and questions to ask yourselves before you start a campaign. Like, what are the things that you need to answer to be able to answer before you start a divestment campaign? What are the steps that I can take? How should I think about divestment? What are some learned lessons from cities that have already done this? And we update this periodically, so you'll be able to see, as people do more and more of this work, what lessons we pull from their work. We also have a boycott Chevron toolkit. This is the campaign, again, to boycott Chevron. So in here we have different levels and ways for people to get engaged, including getting Chevron-owned gas stations to boycott these gas stations. If there's any auto stores that are selling Chevron branded products, to boycott those. To recruit franchise owners through canvassing, and to do organized pickets, rallies, and marches. So how can we really build out this campaign to boycott Chevron? We have this toolkit here with materials. We also have a People's Arms Embargo toolkit. This is for kind of broader support on campaigns that target corporations. So this is a little bit more broad, but it's really helpful if you're interested in a campaign that's taking on a corporation. And so it has some materials, including how do we set how do we determine our targets? What tactics have been used historically? What has worked? What are the criteria we should think about to assess the movability of a corporation? What are some case studies of effective campaigns to cut ties with genocide? So we have like a couple of these examples in here. And finally, we have our Stop Gaza Genocide Toolkit, which includes materials if you want to protest and mobilize locally, you want to pressure elected officials, you want to raise awareness, you want to fundraise, it's all there. And I think some of the other things that aren't in here that I want to talk about too is really encourage you all to go see a screening of the film The Encampments. I think it's being released tomorrow, and there's going to be screenings in multiple cities. Opening night and opening weekend are really important, so go out and support the film, the encampments, and encourage your friends to go. And it's a really important time for us to be supporting and learning more about the student movement. And yeah, Macklemore and Watermelon Pictures and I think Breakthrough produced it. And also, if you are anywhere near Washington, D.C., on Saturday, there's a mass mobilization, a national march to show that, the movement is not going to be silent, is not going to be divided, despite the best efforts of this administration. The movement will only continue to grow and to stand with Gaza and to stand with Palestine. So there's a national march happening on Saturday the 5th. Okay, with that, we'll take the last 5 minutes and we can do some Q&A. Let's just see. Again, we're just
I'll ask some questions for you. Selena just gathered some. Thank you so much for all these resources. I'm going to put them all in the chat. And thank you, Maria, for the shout out. We are definitely here to skill people up who might feel new to realize we all have the power to organize. I want to pull out a specific question that I saw. Someone asked, would asking a person what they think would benefit the community be a good way to start the conversation? What do you think about that, Celine? And what would that look like?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? If what?
Would asking a person what they think would benefit the community, like maybe where our tax dollars should be going, be a good way to start the conversation?
I think anything that is not a closed-ended question, if that makes sense, would help start a conversation. So as long as you're not asking like a yes or no question, because if you ask a yes or no question, they can close that out really quickly. So if you say, do you think this would help, but if you ask an open-ended question that can start a discussion, I think it's a good way to start the canvas. And I don't know if you agree with that, Leah, but I think from my experience, it's always good to plant the seed at least, and not try to ask a question that can get someone to say no and just close off quickly.
I super agree with that. And I want to ask a different question. Someone's asking, what if we want to host something, but we don't have a specific target or action? How can canvassing be useful outside of a campaign?
That's completely fine. You can canvass also for education and awareness. So even if you want to just canvass and say that like you want to canvass to just draw attention to where our tax dollars are going, for example, that's totally fine, because also one of the biggest things that has happened in the past 17 months has been the shift in public opinion, and that has shifted a lot of things, even on a concrete level. So if we can really especially now in a moment where a lot of people are really aware of the lack of services and like the deteriorating reality and conditions of like the healthcare system and the education system, and the fact that if you're drawing attention to the fact that, hey, this is actually where your money's going and it's not going to all of these things that we actually need, that can also get people agitated. So even if you don't have a specific action or a campaign right now, maybe someone that you canvass will be able to develop one. And it's just important, I think, you can canvass for the sake of public awareness and education. That's totally fine.
Thank you so much, Celine. I want to also ask you about your experience canvassing. I'm adapting Thomas's question. What about places like stores, cafes, places where workers are? What does it look like to canvass in a place that isn't technically public? And how do you navigate getting kicked out?
It depends your objective. So for example, I canvassed a bunch, I was part of a group that canvassed a bunch of businesses and restaurants to actually just invite them out to like a community event and to invite people out to action. So for example, sometimes I would go and see if like they would be willing, so it depends. Like you can go out to stores and you can talk about like to the owners or to workers about whatever you're planning. And I think that's like a more friendly way to approach it. For example, you can go and see if the business, if you're trying to go into like a business, you can see if they'd want to be sponsors at an event you have, or if they might be willing. I think it's good to have a couple levels of asks. The lowest being, can you carry this flyer that I have? Because sometimes if you want to go and canvass it or talk to businesses, you might want to, at the very least, talk to the owners or the workers about what you're doing, and then like leave them with something concrete like a flyer or some stuff that they can maybe carry or post up as a sign at their business. And then you can also have like higher level asks like, would you be interested in being a sponsor at a future event we're having? Or you can even invite people to an event you're having. So like if you want to invite workers to like a local labor meetup or something, you can also do that too. So I think it just really depends on your objectives and why you're canvassing there. Otherwise, if you want to go to like a busy plaza or a place where there are multiple cafes and businesses and you just want a table outside, that's also very doable because, you know, especially if you know that people show up in these areas a lot and you know, and they get busy. I hope that answers the question.
That was great. I guess the very last thing I want to ask is, could you just share about an example of successful canvassing that you've done and what made it successful?
I think like the I've done door to door before and I've done that in pairs, but I think like what has been really cool has been going to either like you know, there's like, for example, at my mosque here there's monthly events, and we always canvass around our campaigns, and there's always like people of all ages who express interest, and we get to follow up with them pretty quickly and bring them into the work. Or you know, sometimes we canvas outside of in like really busy shopping areas. And I think usually when we have like, especially if we have like snacks or you know, something in addition to like the material we're trying to give people, people typically stop by and they ask questions, and actually like, you know, sometimes businesses express their support too. So I think just the most successful canvases I've had has been times where like we've organized them in places where we know for sure like the community that we're trying to engage is going to show up, and those have been the most successful because you know, a lot of people have questions of like, how do you engage people who are unfamiliar or maybe like not super supportive, and that's the reality of a lot of, you know, communities. But you also have people who are aware and who are supportive but haven't taken action yet or haven't really or don't know what to do with that support, and those are also people that you want to reach. So I think, you know, it's great to also go places where you have people who you know might be interested but just aren't organized and get them involved in something. All right, I think we're probably at time. Thank you all so much for joining, and thanks for pulling those questions, Leah. And yeah, definitely bringing community into through having something that you can share, like food, snacks, stuff like that. Yeah, just reading the comments. Thank you all for sharing, for joining, and just keep an eye out for the resources. We will send a follow-up.
Thank you all so much. I'm dropping the resources one more time in the chat, and we'll also email them out. Please be in touch through the interest form so we can plug you in. And thank you for all that y'all do for justice. Take care.
Take care. Bye, everyone. Bye.